This is a Gilbriar Productions video by me, Paula Stone.
Good morning. Welcome to Maggie's Gardens. I'm Maggie Livings, and you've been here once before. This is your second time, and we're going to look at some of the spring native wildflowers that I grow. I've been out here now about 17 years. I started planting some trees prior to actually moving out. But these gardens in front here are about 12, 13 years old. And it was a lot of work. But now I do very little. A bit of weeding here and there. One of the things I'd like to show you are the Anacacho trees, Anacacho orchids. They're native more to South Texas and northern Mexico. And they suffered in the freeze this year. In fact, more trees, I think, suffered than did the forbs and the wildflowers. But you can see how sparsely, and a lot of this is dead wood on here. They're a mess. But they're coming back from the base also. So in the end, I may cut these canes down and see what happens. Because I surely don't like the looks of them like this. This is a pink one, which is unusual to find, and it's in even worse shape. C'est la vie. This is Penstem and Cobea, but it's been slightly influenced by its friend and relative over here on the other side of the garden, which is Penstem and triflorus, or the hill country penstemon. These flowers tend to mix up together, and so the typical color of Cobea is the more whitish flower. But these have begun to turn a little bit of lavender because of the interbreeding, hybridization, or whatever happens in plants. And they're beautiful, whatever color they are. I'll also mention that I am no scientist. I keep no records. I am not a botanist. I just have a love of gardening with native plants that has brought me to this place. 99% of the plants that I garden with are native to the state of Texas, somewhere. This plant right here is a Salvia Engelmannia. I have several of them around the garden, and they're just a lovely little blue flower. I like the foliage too. And I think that's another thing that you want to look at when you're looking at plants is textures and foliage shapes and foliage colors. Look at these three plants right here. This is Monarda, this is standing cypress, and then this is the Salvia. And you see with that, you have all kinds of textures and a variety of colors of green. And of course, then there's all the colors of greens in the leaves and the weeds here. Weeding, I'll mention a little bit about weeding. I have changed my tactics over the years. The one thing that I want to maintain in my gardens is some definition. In other words, that individual plants or groups of plants have the ability to exert their power so that you can see them. And so that requires keeping weeds away from them to some extent. There's one plant that blooms in the late summer, Doveweed, which is a beautiful little plant, and there's several varieties of it. In the beginning, I pulled all those plants out, but I have learned not to do that because they add texture, a very nice gray-green color, and even they're not really showy plants. They cover the earth, and that is a real important thing, and particularly when you're thinking about xeriscaping is covering the soil to keep the temperature down. So I weed differently, but I do always pull out as much of the thistles, non-native thistles, and the annual weeds that come up, because they just cause a garden to lose its definition. And you don't see the plants, you just see this mass of green. What you see right now, because the spring bloomers have come on and are still kind of coming on a little bit, but the late spring, early summer flowers, the Indian blankets, this is goldenrod, prairie goldenrod right here, Monarda, Salvia Ferrenasia here. These things will be coming on. This is a cycle for all these flowers to be blooming, and that's one of the beauties of gardening, period, but particularly native plants, because you learn about what grows around you if you're paying attention. These are white, I don't know honestly if they're cultivars or just a variant of the wine cup, Calroi, and they are beautiful. They self-seed very easily, and they just look like the purple, magenta, whatever color you call the one that we normally see. And I have some, we'll look at those too. These are spiderworts right here, and they're just a fascinating flower to me. You can see the seed heads here. Not seed heads, I'm sorry, the flower buds. They will flower one by one, and so these flower over a long period of time, but they close up in the afternoon. So don't use them in a flower arrangement for an evening engagement, because they'll close up. This area right here, if you look at it, you don't see a lot of color, some in the pinstem, and this is the hill country pinstem, and beginning to drop the buds, the flowers. But this is a great area to look at textures. The palmetto here, and also in here I have a datura, but it's still small, so we won't worry about that one. The goldenrod, now this has been interesting, and I think this is primarily due to the freeze. This plant has been here for at least 10 years, and it's stayed confined to this area over in here. Goldenrod is notorious for spreading, and so you don't really want it in a garden area that it's going to take over. And that's what's happened after this freeze. And why, I don't know, but I do believe it's related to the freeze. Now this is a tall goldenrod, and it's planted in a semi-shady area. It does not bloom well, but it offers a lot of green. Now I will be pulling a lot of this out. It'll have to be watered and damp, and then I'll start pulling some out, because it's taken over. But for the moment, it's pretty lovely, I think. Here's another really nice plant. If you don't mind a plant that takes care of itself and self-seeds, this is laurel-leaf sage, Salvia Lirada. And look at those leaves. They're beautiful, beautiful sort of semi-ground cover. I think they're just lovely. But they do self-seed very easily. And so if you're have an area that you want to tightly control what grows in it, this is probably not the plant for you. But I don't have any areas like that. I let plants pretty much do what they will. Right above me is an interesting tree. This is a native, I talked about this in the last video, native Texas peach, Prunus texana. The peaches are about the size of the tip of my little finger. They're mostly seed. They taste a little bit like almonds. But look at the shape of the tree. That's what I really like about it. the branches, trunk and limbs. It's really a nice shape. And that's another thing in gardening that you need to look at: structure, height, to give interest to your gardens. The other interesting thing about this tree, you can see the little sort of knobs on this stem here. This tree flowered out before the freeze, and the blossoms on this tree were encased in ice. It was gorgeous, but there are no fruit because of that. This area right here, if you look at it, you don't see a lot of color. Some mullein in the pin stem, and this is the hill country pin stem, beginning to drop the buds, native or is the flowers. Not native? But this is a great area to look at textures. For who knows how long. The palmetto here naturalized itself, and also in here I have a datura. I don't know that anybody's really sure, but it's still small. Was so here before Europeans or the goldenrod. Now this has been interesting, and I think this is primarily due to the freeze. This plant has been here for being distributed around the world from the time that man got in a boat. They're nice, lovely, velvety, fascinating leaves, and they have a bloom stalk that's about 3 feet high, 2 to 3 feet high on them when they get this big. Little tiny yellow flowers. Fascinating plant. Too many of them would not be so fascinating. This is a yopon that I planted in the sea oats. Yopon is not particularly native to this very area. It's almost too dry for it, but it's done well. And this gets very little extra water in the heat of the summer, maybe once a month, if that. And this is a rusty Blackhaw Viburnum, which sadly did not bloom this year because of the freeze. But it is beautiful when it's covered in white umbel-shaped flowers, kind of like the yarrow. It's just gorgeous. This is a Texas persimmon, and this is a pretty nice specimen right here. It looks good now too. They've been hit fairly hard by the freeze. I don't know if it's age related of the trees or if it's the freeze, but some of them are not leafing out as nicely as this one is. They would be like the Anacachos. There's a little green here and a little green there, and they look really straggly. This is a beautyberry, which I planted, and it's suffering the same, as you can see. Usually by now it'd be solid green. I'm just waiting on a lot of these plants to see what happens to them over time. If this plant stays like this, I'll cut it way back. I'm hoping maybe it'll leaf out some more. I figure if it's alive out here, it's alive down here. So I'm hoping to see more green. This is a sycamore leaf snowbell. It is a plant that's on the endangered list. You will not find it in the nursery trade. And I got it from a friend. So, and you can see there are many, many blossoms on it. Okay, I have these two flame leaf sumacs in a pot that were for a friend, and I was not able to deliver them, so they ended up staying in the pots during the freeze. And I recently was talking to my friend Bill Neiman, and I said, I think they're gone because they haven't leafed out. And he said, do you know how to tell if a plant in a pot is dead or not? And I said, no. He said, well, you pull it out of the pot, and you look at the roots, and if the exterior casing of the roof slips off, the plant is dead. And so I tried that here, and you can see that's exactly what happened. This part of the root just slipped off. The covering of that part of the root just slipped off. So it's basically a goner. Just pulls off in my hand. So the rock wall I think we've looked at before, but not in this state. As I mentioned before, Hal and I built this wall over a period of about 18 months probably. It was simply soil that was put here for the pad for the house. And rather than plant grass on it, we decided, well, I decided we'd build a wall here. That's a pink skullcap. Once again, the pin stamens up at the top, you can see how they're a variety of colors. They just mix up. Mealy blue sage up there. And I have several dahlias in here, Dahlia frutescens, Dahlia wrightii, which is the gray one, I think. And I cut them all way, way back, even before the freeze, really. I start early on my pruning because I have so much to do. I can't wait till late winter time. Once things have had a hard freeze, I'll start cutting back. Here's an unusual plant right here. The yellow yucca. Not a red yucca, a yellow red yucca, I guess. Don't see them very often. And I'm not sure where I got that, although most likely I got it from the Wildflower Center plant sales. That's where I get the majority of my plants. The unusual plants are very hard to find. They're not unusual in nature, but they're unusual in nurseries. And that's been a real problem as far as I'm concerned with the native plant movement and the nursery industry. They simply are not adapting to the need to grow plants that can tolerate the climate that they're in, that are not from Asia or South America or wherever else. There are many, many beautiful plants here that we can use. And they just won't grow them because they don't know them. Claret cup cactus. They are many out here, and they're all the ones around the house are all transplanted from somewhere out on the property. And the plant that I probably dislike the most, it's not only invasive, it's obnoxious and yucky and ugly, is Burr Clover. And it has proliferated out here over the last few years to the extent that I really can't fight it. You know, I do minimally what I can, but it's very, very invasive and has millions of seeds, so I do what I can. I try to overplant. Here's a great little scenario here with the pin stamens and the pink evening primrose, and the tall plant, ferny looking plant, is asparagus. That was originally going to be an asparagus bed, but it's kind of evolved into an asparagus wildflower bed. And at the end, down here, you'll see 4 nerve daisies. And the blue bonnets, which are just about pooped out. They're all going to seed now. The Mealy blue sage. And look at this paintbrush right here in this green. Look at that color against that green. Isn't that amazing? Talk about complementary colors.
It's lovely.
Here is a great example, side by side, of our 2 famous paintbrushes. This one is an annual. the ones that everyone is familiar with that bloom just as the bluebonnets have peaked, then the paintbrushes begin to bloom. This is Castaleja Indivisia. This, however, is a perennial paintbrush, and if you look closely at the flowers, you can see the difference. This one is more tightly whorled than this one. Color's different here, but the prairie paintbrush comes in a multiplicity of colors. This is without a doubt my favorite native flower. And it's my favorite partly because I can grow it. Because for years my favorite was the bluebell. But I have a hard time growing that out here. It likes too much water. Here's a great little plant. This is a rain lily, the little white lily. And has it rained recently? Not really, but you know, it did. It's been misty a little bit. And I gather those seed after they go to seed, and I just throw them around, and I guess one ended up there. Isn't that gorgeous? I didn't plan it. It just happened. This is a skeleton leaf goldeneye, which is good and bad. It is a plant that will spread very easily, but it's good in that you can pull it up rather easily. And it's good in that it has beautiful yellow flowers on it, and that it blooms in the heat of the summer. So there's more good than bad. So I grow it. And then the four-nerve daisy and the Engelmann daisy. And then over here, whoops, this is Flameocanthus, which every year I cut these shrubs to the ground, hummingbird bush or Anacacho. And but this year it froze to the ground. I mean, it came back from the roots, not from the canes of the plant. But it certainly looks robust now. Here's a good example of why I pull out all the little grasses. You can see down here by this Engelmann daisy, all these little annual whatevers in here. And so once I get rid of those, you have more of an opportunity to see that bluebonnet that's gone to seed. You can just tell more what's going on. Oh, here's a good one. This is Nolina Lindheimeri. If I don't have these backward, there's Nolina Lindheimeri and Nolina texana. And I believe Nolina texana is the one with the little short flower. It flowers down in the plant. But Lindheimeri creates these giant stalks of blooms. This is a self-seeder here. You can see all this feathery green up in here. This is Liatris. Gay feather is another name for it. Blazing star. Lots of common names for it. I got the first few of those down here on the county road. There's some out there, and I probably harvested about 5 or 6 corms. They're little kind of flat-shaped, bulby looking things, but they're not really true bulbs. And I mean, they're everywhere now. They self-seed very easily, and they are gorgeous. Another favorite. Well, these aren't, without the bright sun, these aren't as pretty as they might be, but this field of spiderworts. And here's my sumac, the flame leaf sumac that I planted. So those 2 in the wheelbarrow were dead, but I have 3 that are going to spread all over out here, which is what I want, you know. What else? Let's go look over there a little bit. I have planted Maximilian Sunflower plants that I bought, I think 2 years ago, is bundles from Native American Seed. And boy, they've taken off. I think we looked at this bed before. This bed I started as a screen for that road in the fence from the house. And there's big Mealy, and there's evergreen sumac, which is starting to leaf back out. I'll show you. There's probably 6 or 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 evergreen sumacs that I planted back here, and they'll get big and act as a screen. And this is the Maximilian Sunflower. And it has really spread nicely this year. And as you can see, I have drip irrigation in here because both these plants, the sunflowers and the Mealy, need a little bit extra water. Not the sumac, however. You can kill them with water. But this field of spiderworts, and here's my sumac, the flame leaf sumac that I planted. So those 2 in the wheelbarrow were dead, but I have 3 that are going to spread all over out here, which is what I want, you know. What else? Let's go look over there a little bit. I have planted Maximilian Sunflower plants that I bought, I think 2 years ago, is bundles from Native American Seed. And boy, they've taken off. I think it's getting colder instead of warmer. I think we looked at this bed before. This bed I started as a screen for that road in the fence from the house. And there's big Mealy, and there's evergreen sumac, which is starting to leaf back out. I'll show you. There's probably 6 or 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 evergreen sumacs that I planted back here, and they'll get big and act as a screen. And this is the Maximilian Sunflower. And it has really spread nicely this year. And as you can see, I have drip irrigation in here because both these plants, the sunflowers and the Mealy, need a little bit extra water. Not the sumac, however. You can kill them with water. Oh, here's the cool one over here. Oh, and look at that. Isn't that cool? All those little texture-y things in there. This is a Mimosa Borealis. It's very prickly. But I think this might be the first year I've seen it really flower nicely like this. I don't remember it in recent years, that's for sure. This is a rough leaf dogwood. As you can see, a tree, and it'll grow to 15, 20 feet probably. It's a little inhibited by this oak tree here. It does spread by suckers, so you want to be careful where you plant it. But you can see it is fixing to pop into bloom. It's going to be gorgeous. These are white little umbel flowers, and it's just going to be beautiful. And here also is, oh, there's some blooms. This is Clematis pitcheri, and it's been in this area for many years. And here is a bloom, just hasn't opened yet, but it's also known as leather flower. It's really tough, but it climbs up in these trees. I had a trellis here that I've taken away, but it's really beautiful when it just covered with those little purple flowers. I have the red one in another spot, and it's about this big. It has never grown. It's been there for 3 years now. It's done nothing, and I'm not sure why, but it's still alive. But this is a really cool plant. Here's a, oh yes, the prickly ash. This one's getting ready to pop into bloom too. And it's not much more than that. You can see a couple little flowers there that are already open, so they don't get real white. It's not real dramatic. But the other name for this is toothache tree. They used to take the leaves, it has a real citrusy flavor to it, chew on them for a toothache. So I hear. This is a shade-tolerant flowering plant, blue coral. And you can see where it gets its name because the bloom stalk is very tightly curled up, and then it gradually unfurls as it blooms till it's the little flower stalk or frond or whatever is straight out. It's a fascinating plant. It's an annual, self-seeds fairly easily, but it loves the shade. One of our few flowering plants, it loves the shade. Cedar Sage, right here, you see the red trumpet-shaped flowers. Hummers really like this. And then you can see the yarrow, which they all just showed up here. I planted cedar sage in a bed across the way here, but it likes it better over here, so it came over here, I guess. And then the red and the yarrow, white of the yarrow. I just think that's such a gorgeous combination. And these will get, once they flower and the seed pods have formed and the seeds are dry, I'll cut them down to a low plant because they look really, really straggly when the there's not much attractive about the bloom stalk, I don't think. And here the yarrow, like I was talking about, cutting them early. If you want to cut some to dry, these are past the prime state of cutting them, whereas these are still really nice and bright white. So this would be a better choice to cut. These will just dry up and turn brown. These are twist leaf yuccas, and there's also some little blue stem kind of mixed in here along with some cactus. But this is a west wall. This wall gets so hot in the summertime it will burn your hand if you touch it. And the wire, hog wire on it is about Alamo vine. I have some Alamo vine planted to grow This is relatively new down here, but the one on the other end has been there for years, and it covers the wall. So it keeps it cool, and it tolerates that heat. How, I don't know, but this area gets very little water. I hand water it rarely. This is an Agarita, which has been here for years. I did not plant it. You know, they're native to this area. Very prickly, great bushy plant as long as you don't have to walk near it, because they're very prickly. The birds love it under here because they can hide out under here. And the one thing about this year is they have not flowered. The freeze. I have not seen one at all that has flowered or berried. And of course people love to make Agarita jelly and all kinds of things with those berries, and they're very fragrant, but not this year. Buckeye that's over here, like I mentioned, I think the freeze had something to do with causing plants to think they had to act like their life was threatened or something. But the seed pods on this, there's hundreds of them on here. I can't even believe I've never seen such a proliferation. And every one that I have is like this. The low-growing shrubby plant that you see right here, kind of limey green, is Xminia. And there's a couple little puny flowers here is coming out, little yellow flowers. But once it blooms, this whole area will have bright yellow blossoms on it. And it's a great plant, but it does spread easily. Another one of those plants, you want to be careful about where you put it, or be prepared to dig it out when it goes where you don't want it. But you can see in the background the wine cups. This is a beautiful area for them. Shady, they like it under the trees. This is a red bud. This is a possum haw. This is a Mexican plum. And of course in the spring, this is beautiful, all the flowering trees here. Not exactly planted in a great spot, but it's where they are and where they're going to stay. But this is really nice in the summer with the Xminia blooming. One of the things I wanted to mention is vetch. There's a number of species of vetch that are native out here. There's one that's very low growing, and one that climbs on everything as high as it can go practically. And it is in the legume family, so it is a good nitrogen fixer for the soil. I was visiting one time with Andrea at the Wildflower Center, and I was fussing about vetch, and she said, "Oh no, Maggie, it's so good for the soil." I said, "But it's such a pain." So what I do now is I do pull out the tall stuff that grows up on plants, but I leave the low-growing ones because they don't seem to look bad, and they're doing something good for the soil. So I've compromised, and that's what weeding is about, compromising with nature.